Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So this was new today. New today and fascinating to me. Last night on the show, you might remember, we talked about how this pressure campaign against Ukraine, for which President Trump is being impeached, this campaign was designed to get the government in Ukraine to announce some kind of investigation into Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden. And because you can't put too fine a point on it with these guys, even if you try, the specific demand was that Ukraine needed to announce this Biden investigation publicly. They didn't need to just start an investigation. They needed to announce they were doing so. So, of course, it would have maximum, damaging or embarrassing political effect. But actually, put that quote back up there on the screen again from Bill Taylor's testimony. Because it wasn't just an investigation of Joe Biden that the president wanted announced by Ukraine, right? It was also that he wanted an announced investigation from Ukraine of 2016 election interference. 2016 election interference by Ukraine. He wanted an investigation announced into that, too. 2016 election interference by Ukraine is not a thing. It did not happen. It was Russia that interfered in the 2016 election to benefit Donald Trump. It wasn't Ukraine. So last night on the show, we tried to find in the wild some trace, some explanation for where that weird sort of backwards theory about the 2016 election might have come from. I mean, the whole U.S. intelligence community says it was Russia. The bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee just a few weeks ago said it was Russia. More than a dozen Russian intelligence officers are currently indicted by the Justice Department because it was Russia. It was Russia. So where is this weird thing coming from that Trump is pursuing in this pressure campaign in Ukraine? This insistence by him that it wasn't Russia that interfered in 2016, it was Ukraine that did it. Well, as of last night, as I mentioned on the show last night, the incidents we know of in the wild where that strange thing might have come from was documented in this FBI interview report from Trump's deputy campaign chair, Rick Gates. Rick Gates explaining to the FBI under penalty of perjury that the argument that it wasn't Russia, it was Ukraine, that argument was spread in the first instance in this country by Donald Trump's now imprisoned campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. And where did Paul Manafort get that theory that he started spreading in this country? Well, what Gates told the FBI is that he was parroting it from a guy named Konstantin Kilimnik, whom Manafort had worked with in Ukraine for years. Kilimnik is somebody who the FBI says is affiliated with Russian intelligence agencies. So this theory that Trump was demanding that Ukraine needed to provide him an announced investigation about, right? He wanted the Biden investigation announced, but he wanted this other investigation announced too. Best as we can tell, this other thing, he wanted an announced Ukrainian investigation into this weird claim that it wasn't Russia, it was Ukraine that interfered in our last election. That claim appears to have originated with Russian intelligence. Russian intelligence gets fed to Trump's former campaign chair, who's had lots of dealings with pro-Putin elements in the world, right? He's now in prison, right? But it goes from Russian intelligence to Manafort. Manafort is the one who spreads it. Giuliani admits that he's been talking to Manafort about strategy on this whole campaign that he's been running for the president in Ukraine. Right, but that chain of command sort of makes sense, right? Russia wants to muddy the waters. Russia wants to blame somebody else. Russia doesn't want to be held to account for what they did. Well, that's what we knew as of last night. Then knock me over with a feather. This happened today.
Now, are you familiar with these allegations of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election?
I mean, there have been rumors out there about things like that. But, there was nothing hard, at least nothing that I was aware of.
There was nothing based in fact to support these allegations.
Yes.
And in fact, who was responsible for interfering and meddling in the 2016 election?
Well, the U.S. intelligence community has concluded that it was Russia.
Ambassador Ivanovich, are you aware that in February of 2017, Vladimir Putin himself promoted this theory of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election?
You know, maybe I knew that once and have forgotten, but I'm not familiar with it now.
Well, let me show you a press statement that President Putin made in a joint press conference with Viktor Orban of Hungary on February 2nd of 2017, where he says, second, as we all know, during the presidential campaign in the United States, the Ukrainian government adopted a unilateral position in favor of one candidate. More than that, certain oligarchs, certainly with the approval of the political leadership, funded this candidate, or female candidate to be more precise. Now, how would this theory of Ukraine interference in the 2016 election be in Vladimir Putin's interest?
Well, President Putin must have been aware that there were concerns in the U.S. about Russian meddling in the 2016 elections and what the potential was for Russian meddling in the future. Classic for an intelligence officer to try to throw off the scent and, create an alternative narrative that maybe might get picked up and get some credence.
An alternative narrative that would absolve his own wrongdoing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Turns out this thing that Trump has been spinning, this weird thing about Ukraine interfering in the election, I want you to announce an investigation into that. He's spinning that exactly the way that Vladimir Putin has been spinning it. And the way that Russian intelligence was feeding it to his now imprisoned campaign chairman, who was talking to Rudy Giuliani about strategy in this campaign. And that was just like an interstitial thing that came up at a quiet moment today. And man, what's next?
It is Monday, the 18th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right, another one of those weekends. It seemed like it was a slow news weekend. But I would say that lying about your trip to Walter Reed Hospital on Saturday just to go visit some patient there, and geez, while you're there, why don't we just stop in for phase 1 of your annual physical 3 months early? Phase 1 of your annual physical 3 months early? Usually it's all done all at once and you announce it when you go. And you don't do it unannounced with aides running around like their heads were chopped off. You should have seen the video. Wow, they were fairly frantic. Granted, Trump did walk to his limo, but he was going there for some reason, and we don't know what. Because these guys lie. They never tell the truth. Not once have they ever done that. So I don't believe that he went to Walter Reed for whatever reason he said it was. And I got to tell you, that's just the small amount of news that happened over the weekend. On a slow news weekend for once. Wow. Well, we picked up some stories, and, of course, sorry about Friday. We were going to have the hearings, except there was, an extended break there. And our feed decided to not come back after the break. So just as the break was about to end, they went to their so-called regular programming, which was not. But that's the way other people do it, and we were stuck. So still trying to perfect the C-SPAN feed. That would be helpful. So regardless, we'll have the hearings on Wednesday, one way or another. We will not preempt the show. There will be a recording. Sam Cedar had recorded the first, 4 hours or plus, almost 5 hours of testimony on the first one. And so we'll pick up some recordings of it at least. But for those like me who like to experience it in real time, we used to call that live. We will have something that will allow us to do that, just not the perfect feed, the perfect protocol. We'll do it. But regardless, sorry about Friday. I didn't even put up a pod. I apologize to the depths of my heart, and that's sincere. I just had so much going on between running the radio station and real life. Yeah, for a slow news weekend, it didn't stop the life stuff that you have to take care of. Though that wasn't so traumatic. It wasn't traumatic at all. But it fills time, and I decided to grant myself a break, which I normally don't do. Got to keep going. The show must go on. Indeed. Well, parts of the show, not this one in particular, still went on. And here we are now. We're going to pick up what we missed on Friday and go beyond it, because news is always breaking out there in the world, isn't it? Yes, it is. Terrible tragedy again. Wake up to a multiple shooting in Fresno. Something weird. About 35 people gathering in the backyard for the football game. And now this had happened around 6:30, so I guess they had watched the Niner game and then were getting ready for, I can't even, the LA Rams and whoever they played. I can't remember last night because I wasn't paying attention. I was doing other things. But an extended family and some friends, little kids, and somebody came in looking for someone or that group and shot a bunch of people dead and wounded a bunch of people too. So that's always nice to wake up to. And it's always about the guns, no matter what the NRA says. The NRA is putting themselves out there as one of the first civil rights organizations in the history of America. Damn lying freaks. You were a hunter lobby. Give me a break. Civil rights for hunters, maybe, but I wouldn't call it a civil rights organization, because as soon as black people started getting guns, that was when gun rights, were pretty much suppressed for a particular segment of people of a particular hue. Even now, you could open carry as a black man, but you wouldn't live very long. No, not at all. And do we say that's just the way it is? Yeah, that's the way it is, but it's not just the way it is, and that's why we vote, and we will be changing this, even though we're this close to turning into Bolivia. Wow, they're doing a Pinochet-style type coup. They're going to start purging literally their opponents. They're arresting their political opponents right now, like their Hillarys and their Bills and their Obamas. They're arresting them right now. And a bunch of journalists, too. They're taking their Rachel Maddow's and even their Lawrence O'Donnell's. Lawrence even. And they're throwing him in jail, probably a soccer stadium. And we know what happened the last time that happened. Yeah, and there'll be people dropped, about 1,500 feet from a helicopter like they did before. Sometimes in shark-infested waters, sometimes over just land. Let us not forget, we backed the repressive regimes in Latin America right at those times that Pinochet was taking over. That's what we do. Oh, yeah, here's another one. North Korea is threatening the life of Joe Biden. And what did Trump say? Hey, come on. We can make a deal. I'll take care of Joe. What? You'll take care of Joe? This is how really even the Russians can't figure out our political structure enough. They really thought Joe was going to be the candidate against Trump. I don't know anyone else in the party that really took that seriously, even now. Okay? There's a lot of people that go, oh, we feel secure with Joe. Well, there's a lot of us who don't really want Joe there because he doesn't seem like the fighter that we need. And when I say fighting, I mean sticking up for basic civil liberties and human rights. Simple. Sticking up for it. Not rolling over because you got patronized for your weak-kneed liberal guilt that happens to be white. Every time, I still cannot forgive Joe for what he did to Anita Hill. I cannot. Because that took some fortitude to stand up against that assault. All right? And to make matters even worse, speaking of the courts, we got the Monash guy taking over Thurgood Marshall's seat on the Second Circuit. What? Lifetime appointment, too. Well, we had an icon in history, and they have somebody that's put in there specifically to deconstruct the administrative state. What's one of the other ways that you deconstruct the administrative state? Well, how about pardoning war criminals? So that you can destroy the very moral code of the military. That's one way to deconstruct the administrative state. That's one way. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, that was Rachel at the top, explaining how Trump's Ukraine conspiracy theory about the server being there is all part of a classic Putin alternative narrative that he has used, well, in various forms with great success throughout the region. This is not new, and it is odd to hear Jim, shirt-sleeve Jim, spouting off Russian talking points and narratives. Devin Nunes, too. Well, we knew Devin. But it's just, it's jarring, shall we say. Well, in the rest of the menu, a new Ohio law lets students invoke their religion to give wrong answers. My religion doesn't believe 2 + 2 = 4. So I don't have to believe that now, do I? No, you don't have to believe it. But when you fall off the precipice because you can't count, it was God's will then, wasn't it? Democratic victories in Virginia could help bring down Confederate statues. It could, except I think we're going to see a rise of neo-Nazis and the KKK, but that's just me. I just think that history resonates over and over and over. And twice as many Americans are dying from antibiotic-resistant superbugs than previously estimated. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Russia is moving those 3 ships it violently seized from Ukraine last year to a handing over location today, and they actually say that they've handed them over, but we're still waiting for proof. And the widow of Russian dissident Alexander Litvinenko, conveniently poisoned with polonium in London in 2006, is taking legal action against Boris Johnson for repressing a report on Russian meddling in Britain till after their election. Maybe after their election. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, you know what? I want to add something that I put out obliquely on social media about an event on a supposedly eventless weekend that occurred, and I want to give some kudos to Kelly for attending to this. We had a listener or follower on Facebook, our Netroots Radio Facebook page, who reached out in a direct message, and turned out that they were feeling pretty terrible about life and didn't want to be in this plane of existence anymore. And Kelly professionally and competently, humanely, and compassionately embraced this person. And I will say saved them. Okay? I mean, it was their decision to save themselves. But sometimes people need an ear. And so that's the kind of crew we have here at Netroots Radio. We're part of the resistance, and part of resisting is helping each other constantly, like family. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the homepage, from the chat room link at netrootsradio.com, you will notice our link to our Patreon site, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. A recurring contribution of the price of a espresso type coffee drink sent our way goes so far. I cannot tell you how much it helps. It really takes a bite out of our bills, and any bite is a good bite. So thank you for your generosity over these many years, and we would be unable to do it without you indeed. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam. Follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that out on social media for your social media pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right. Let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. Share Blue Media has changed their moniker to the American Independent. So that is their name now, and we'll just go with that. And Lisa Needham of the American Independent brings us this first offering. Ohio's House of Representatives just passed a bill that would allow students to give wrong answers on assignments if their religious beliefs conflict with their answers. Really now? Really? The truth is the truth. It doesn't matter what your belief is. Didn't they teach that in religious studies somewhere? I got it. Oh, that's right. We were taught critical thinking skills in Catholic school, surprisingly. Even though Bill Barr is diving into this Opus Dei BS, he's a heretic. All right, and any rational-minded church, they would have been kicked out as heretics a long time ago. And I'm talking to you, Opus Dei. Yeah, you. Regardless, what goes up will come down. It doesn't matter what your belief is of it. The truth is the truth. The Ohio Student Religious Liberties Act, give me a break, overwhelmingly passed the House on Wednesday and now heads to the state Senate. Every Republican in the chamber voted for it because reasonable thinking skills and rational thinking skills are obviously partisan endeavors. Obviously, look at this. With nearly every Democrat voting against it in the Senate, Republicans hold 24 of the chamber's 33 seats, giving the bill a good chance to pass there and become law. And what a law it is! The bill's language says that a student cannot be prohibited from, quote, engaging in religious expression in the completion of homework, artwork, or other written or oral assignments, end quote. Instead of being graded on the correct answers, students will be graded using standards of substance and relevance, and a teacher shall not penalize or reward a student based on the religious content of a student's work. Really now? Are you serious? That is going to be upheld? I doubt it. In other words, a student could engage in religious expression by turning in a science paper filled with anti-science creationist dogma and not be penalized. They could write that fossils are not real and were put there by God instead of being the product of the passage of time. Well, heck, I'm already hearing in this region that the earth is flat and all of us have been hypnotized and brainwashed by the deep state. And if something's not done, they're going to have to do something to us. And they have guns that they open carry to let everyone know what polite society really is. The bill's sponsor, Republican State Representative Timothy Geithner, defended the bill by saying, "We live in a day when our young people are experiencing stress and danger and challenges we never experienced growing up." Really? So that's the reason you have to lie about science? Because you're scared of black and brown people maybe becoming the dominant racial complexion in our body politic? Scared, fella? You sound scared. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays is brought to us by the Associated Press. An army of Confederate monuments dot Virginia's landscape, but some of those statues could soon start coming down after Election Day gave Democrats control of the General Assembly for the first time in decades. Members of the new legislative majority say they plan to revive proposals to make it easier to remove the public displays honoring Civil War soldiers and generals in a state that was home to 2 Confederate capitals. Previous attempts to do so were quickly dispatched in the Republican-controlled General Assembly in votes largely along party lines, which they will be now too. Because Republicans, at least the modern-day ones, always back the traitors. Always. This is about what do we remember? What do we honor? It's the right to decide what we celebrate, said Delegate-elect Sally Hudson, a Democrat whose district includes Charlottesville. Hudson said she plans to reintroduce legislation her predecessor, David Toscano, sponsored, giving cities and counties the ability to remove Confederate monuments. Local governments are currently hamstrung by a 1904 state law that protects memorials for war veterans, no matter what war. The long-running debate over whether such displays are appropriate in public spaces intensified after white supremacists, some very fine people according to Dumont Dunny, descended on Charlottesville 2 years ago in part to protest the city's attempt to move a statue of General Robert E. Lee, and the event descended into chaos, and a white supremacist plowed his car into a crowd, killing a woman and injuring dozens more, but that was after Tiki Torch dapper Nazis surrounded synagogues in the area, chanting, "You will not replace us. You will not replace us," while giving the stiff-arm salute and goose-stepping. Nothing unusual about that. In the aftermath of the violence, many places around the country quickly started taking monuments down, but not in Virginia. Charlottesville has been fighting a lawsuit based in part on the 1904 law over the city's 2017 decision to remove the Lee statue and its later decision to move another of Thomas Stonewall Jackson. A judge has prevented the removal of both for now. Many lawmakers are likely anxious to carry legislation to address the issue, said Delegate Lamont Bagby, who chairs the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. I can't imagine we would go through the session without that getting a full hearing, Bagby said. I suspect that it will be met with success. Nicole Carlos of Salon brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Twice as many people are dying from antibiotic-resistant infections, also known as superbugs, than previously thought, according to a report published by the CDC. The report states that nearly 3.1 million antibiotic-resistant infections happen each year in the U.S. As a result, an estimated 48,700 people die. Well, that's almost 50,000 in my book. The findings are based on data from millions of patient health records and are an update to the 2013 report in which the Public Health Agency raised concerns about these superbugs. Did you know that the EPA is making it illegal, essentially, for this science to be studied? Did you know that? Because it might impact the profits of some company somewhere. And so what they've done is that they are releasing these patient records in their raw data that outs the patients themselves rather than them remaining anonymous in the survey study, according to HIPAA rules. But the EPA and the people who are deconstructing the administrative state know one way to get science out of government: use your laws against them. That's just a side note. Back to this article. In the 2013 report, the CDC estimated that more than 2 million Americans contracted these infections each year, while at least 23,000 died as a result. Notably, the new report used previously unavailable data and concluded that the 2013 estimate missed about half of the cases and deaths. Hence, this year's report, which illustrates an alarming rise, is bringing past predictions closer to reality. In 2014, economist Jim O'Neill estimated that superbugs will kill an extra 10 million people a year around the world. Many of those who currently die from cancer. That's more than those who currently die from cancer by 2050, if nothing is done to curb this current trend. Well, take your choice. Cancer or some antibiotic-resistant superbug. Wow, what a choice. Well, you know what? We better get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Nazis bad, but funny. Behind every feature you've ever watched is someone who sold somebody with industry clout and cash an idea. Jojo Rabbit is a film that leaves you with respect for those who do this, as there are reasons why this one might not have jumped successfully off the storyboards. The movie follows 10-year-old Jojo, towards the end of World War II, finding his way in the Hitler Youth, with the assistance of an imaginary friend, a darkly absurd Adolf Hitler. Jojo's world is rocked when he discovers that his mom, Rosie, is hiding a Jewish girl, Elsa, in the attic. Jojo, having grown up in the Third Reich, has no knowledge of Jews, outside of the regime's grotesque demonization. In return for not narking on her, he enlists her assistance on a project for his Hitler Youth commander about the evil Jew. His research forms the central storyline here as he develops a relationship with Elsa. We kind of know the kumbaya direction that things are going, but on the way there, we get to see the persistence of the kind of systematic prejudice to which Jojo has been exposed. Newcomer Roman Griffin Davis owns the Jojo character, and his chemistry with Thomasin McKenzie from last year's Leaves No Trace is a wonder to behold, as is Scarlett Johansson's Rosie. The Hitler fantasy is writer-director Taika Waititi himself. Behind the camera, he has created a Wes Anderson-like film down to its quick zooms, precise framing, and anachronistic music. A case can be made that it will always be too soon for making light of what led to the Holocaust, and if you can't look past that, some of the relationships ring hollow and don't work, souring the humor. But if you can ride the spoof wagon, Jojo Rabbit is a film with heart and a message. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. Some 5,600 years ago, people in the Egyptian city of Hierakonpolis did something that's still a very popular activity today. They brewed and drank beer. We know this because archaeologists examining the area near the ruins of a cemetery for the elite discovered a structure containing 5 ceramic vats that would have been heated from below. Residues in the vats confirmed that they had once made beer.
And it's estimated that if these 5 vats were operated at the same time, 325 liters would have been produced, which is equal to 650 cans of Budweiser.
Texas Tech University microbiologist Momen El-Masri. He says this ancient beer would have tasted very different from what our modern palates are used to. The Egyptian beer makers did use malted wheat and barley in the brewing process, but no one had mastered carbonation yet, so the resulting brew was a flat, unfiltered malt beverage with a low alcohol content. El-Masri's colleagues recently sampled thick, dark deposits from the Hierakonpolis vats. The chemical analysis confirmed that they were indeed the product of beer making, and not some other fermented food. The tests also revealed other ingredients ancient Egyptians put in their beer. The researchers found a high concentration of the amino acid proline, which is abundant in dates and some other fruits.
This result suggests that dates could have been used or incorporated in the beer for flavor.
And maybe to add some sweet notes. Hops, which act as both a flavoring and a preservative, weren't added to beer until medieval times.
The use of hops was unknown to the ancient Egyptians, and we think that they used phosphoric acid to preserve their beer.
The residues were indeed high in phosphoric acid, a product of barley grains added during the fermentation process. Phosphoric acid is often used today to prolong the shelf life of alcoholic beverages. Phosphoric acid via barley would have made it possible to mass-produce beer, store it for extended periods, and even transport it, all consistent with the important role beer played in ancient Egyptian society. It not only provided hydration and nutrition, but was also part of religious rituals among the elite. The study is in the journal Scientific Reports. Studying ancient beer has allowed El-Masri to reflect on the intersection of science and history.
I teach a microbiology lab, and we brew beer in the lab, and the students see the whole fermentation process. And thinking about how ancient Egyptians were able to do a similar thing thousands of years ago, it's kind of a very special feeling.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
There are few actions as consequential as the impeachment of the president. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's what Representative Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, said in his opening statement on the first day of the impeachment hearings. President Trump's supporters, in contrast, have characterized the impeachment process as an attempt to overrule or negate the results of the 2016 election. Let's look at the Constitution. Impeachment and the possibility of removal of a duly elected president from office was very much on the minds of the founders. We know this because the Constitution is chock full of references to impeachment, with provisions regarding where the trial is, the Senate, and who decides, the senators, not a jury, and what the vote must be, a 2/3 majority, and who presides, the Chief Justice, and what the penalty must be, removal from office, and what additional punishment is possible, a bar to further holding of office, and the grounds, treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, and the effect on other criminal prosecutions after the president leaves office, none, and who takes over after the removal, the vice president. So yes, this is indeed a very consequential action. But no, the founders did not view the process as overruling an election. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day that workers at the General Motors plant in Atlanta, Georgia, participated in a sit-down strike. This was part of a wave of labor organizing during the 1930s. Other General Motors plants in Kansas City and Cleveland went on strike. The most famous sit-down strike occurred in December in Flint, Michigan, where striking workers occupied General Motors plants for more than 40 days. The goal of these strikes was to unionize under the auspices of the United Auto Workers Union. The United Auto Workers was founded in May of 1935 in Detroit, Michigan. The union was initially part of the American Federation of Labor. However, when John L. Lewis formed the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the UAW left the AFL to join the new Labor Federation. This strategy was first used by CIO rubber workers in February and March of 1936. While it is believed that IWW members at the General Electric Works in Schenectady, New York, were the first to sit down as they protested the firings of 3 fellow IWW members in 1906, the CIO mastered the tactic of the sit-down strike. The method was effective, because when workers sat down on the job, management was hesitant to use force to evict them. They worried about damaging production equipment. The sit-down also made bringing in scab labor very difficult. A 1939 Supreme Court decision effectively ended most sit-down strikes in the United States.
Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry old mobile. Down the road of life we'll fly, automobile bubbling, you and I.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Monday, November 18th, 2019. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. More than 300 public sector union leaders from Africa and Arab countries met recently in Lomé, Togo, at the AFRICON Conference of Public Services International. The conference, held November 12th to 15th, discussed topics such as privatization of public services and the rights of women workers. One of the participants at the conference was Irene Kumalo, the president of PSI's World Women's Committee.
Indeed, today we have had our women's seminar under the theme Fighting Gender-Based Violence with Women Engagement. We've just had our first session. That is the convention that has been Convention 190 that has just been passed in June. So we articulated around that so that we see how it favors us, including them. The Convention 206, so we work around that and we're putting that to the unions so that we make sure that that convention, each member state adopts the convention, ratifies it, and make sure that as trade unions we will monitor the implementation of such. And if it's not implemented, then we'll make sure that we demand the implementation of the C-190 so that gender-based violence can be reduced in countries.
Another participant at the AFRICON Conference of Public Sector Unions was David Boyes, the PSI's Deputy General Secretary.
Today is the second day of AFRICON, and we started out in plenary with a panel on global campaigning. And it's clear that trade unions must put the resources in to engage in campaigning, because campaigns are done in order to bring change. Campaigns must have an objective, and then they must be constituted of a whole series of actions towards a goal. And for us, the goal is social change. For us, the goal is to ensure not only that our members are protected, but that the communities in which we live have universal access to quality public services. So the global campaigning plenary saw a number of new ideas, some innovations, and then we went into the second plenary, which was about putting people over corporate greed, public services over corporate greed. And the key message that we heard there, first of all, is the extent of corporate control of our public institutions, whether it's at local, national, and now even global level. In the afternoon, we had 3 workshops. One was about tax justice, illicit financial flows. Another one was about the hot, very hot issue of migration and refugees and internally displaced people. And a third one about whistleblowers. And the whistleblowers workshop that I was in shows not only the importance of being able to fight corruption and fighting fraud and tax evasion, but the danger that whistleblowers are exposed to. The dangers are many. There's tools that we can use, but there are tools that are lacking. Lacking is a global convention, which we're working on with the ILO, and national legislation. And in the workshop, we were able to point to the recent victory of whistleblower legislation in the European Union, which will be implemented in national law by 2021. but there were many other instances of courageous trade unionists who have put their lives at risk and their careers at risk to denounce malpractice, again, in order to protect the communities in which they live.
I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Quite foggy conditions. Well, it's actually lifted a tad, though half a block up the hill here you can't see. So it's that foggy at least. Increasing clouds throughout the day, partly cloudy mostly, but increasing clouds. Rain showers this evening, clearing overnight, with considerable cloudiness and occasional rain showers tomorrow, which we are, of course, looking forward to. We've had an air stagnation advisory for a couple of weeks now, and the winds will be picking up, apparently, out of the south at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Oh my, a scouring wind with rain. Bring it on! Highs in the mid-60s and overnight lows in the mid to low 40s. Should be in the mid-50s tomorrow while we have our rain. Air pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 32 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.03 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 46 and partly cloudy. Paris is 48 with a rain shower. Rome is 56 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 37 and cloudy. Kabul is 45 and fair. Hong Kong is 66 and partly cloudy with a forecast of bashed heads and a lot of blood in the streets. Mostly perpetuated by the cops. Let's be clear about that. Tokyo, that happens to be in Japan, is 69 with rain, and they have a flood advisory. Oh my. Sydney, Australia is 65 and clear with lots of fires. San Francisco, California is 55 and sunny. And New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Andrew Osborne and Andrei Kuzmin of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see if there's been an update. I don't have an update within the last several hours. So Russia is still expected to return 3 captured Navy vessels to Ukraine, and is moving them to a handover location agreed with Kyiv. Crimea's border guard service was cited as saying by Russian news agencies yesterday, Sunday. A Reuters reporter in the Crimea, which Russia annexed from the Ukraine in 2014. You mean violently stole? Yeah, that's what that was. Earlier on Sunday yesterday, saw Coast Guard boats pulling the 3 vessels through the Kerch Strait toward the Black Sea, where they are expected to be handed over to Ukraine. Ukraine has been pushing for the return as a goodwill gesture from Moscow ahead of a possible 4-way peace summit on eastern Ukraine next month. Surprisingly, the United States is not part of those negotiations. I wonder why. In accordance with agreements reached with Ukraine, 3 Ukrainian ships are being towed to a location agreed with the Ukrainian side for their handover, which will take place on November 18th, today, Crimea's border service said, according to Russian news agencies, and they're always honest. Crimea's border service was not immediately available for comment because they made their comment and they had to go. Russia seized the ships off the coast of Crimea in November last year after opening fire on them and wounding several sailors. Moscow said the ships, 2 small Ukrainian armored artillery vessels and a tugboat, had illegally entered its territorial waters. Kyiv denied that because they were in agreed upon international waters in the tiny little Kerch Strait.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. They be anonymous because when you're dealing with Vlad, convenient things seem to occur. The widow of a Russian dissident murdered in London plans to challenge a decision by Boris Johnson not to publish a report on Russian meddling in Britain, a lawyer representing the widow said. And who is that widow? Marina Litvinenko, whose husband Alexander, a former KGB agent, was murdered with a radioactive isotope in 2006, which was polonium, by the way, sent Johnson a letter saying she planned to take legal action. A response is now expected by 4 p.m. on the 19th of November, 2019, her lawyer said, adding Litvinenko would only proceed if she secures funding via the Crowd Justice fundraising site by that date. The report by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee has been cleared by Britain's security services, but it has not been approved for publication by Johnson's office, meaning it will not be released before the election since Parliament has shut down to allow for campaigning. And apparently putting out this report is tantamount to campaigning against Boris because it'll reveal how much Boris, Nigel Farage, and every single Tory over there is on the dole to Russia. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. And we're going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.